We have quorum. So let's get started, everyone. So I'll call the meeting to order. Welcome back, our committee members, and to let you know that we have 9 items. Pardon? Councillor Mamalidi.
He's exercising his Mamalidi prerogative to get the mayor. Who's this young gentleman?
A new committee member. Councillor Mamalidi.
Yeah, 6.
No, that's perfect.
Yes, so you have to say it. Yes. 56.
Getting big.
So appointed.
So,
135.
Madam Clerk, is it in motion to appoint a new committee member?
come on, say it. Say it.
Might actually arrive.
Go ahead, have your seat. You can't do that. You can't do that. You took it off.
Yeah, I tell it, or someday grab it. Shh, it's good to be. No.
Don't bite my cheek. What do you? No, don't do that. Okay. Don't do that. Then
Take me home.
I gotta throw you out.
Take me home. Stop it. Right there. Stop it right. Or something else. Maybe I take a speech.
You can't make a speech.
I try. I'm not gonna try. Pulling in every step. Yes, this is awesome. Hello, City Toronto, office of City Toronto.
Okay, buddy, I'm going to get you to turn that off now because I'm going to make it an. Good afternoon. Would members of the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee please report to Committee Room 1 for quorum?
Or
Good afternoon. Would members of the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee please report to Committee Room 1 for quorum?
Okay, we can start. Thank you, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order again. We have 9 items on today's agenda. And for those of you who are in the room with us, there's screens at the back with real-time updates. And if you're watching online, you can follow the agenda and debate on your computer, tablet, smartphone at www.toronto.ca/council. Any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none. We'll move on to the minutes from the last meeting of Public Works and Infrastructure. Can I have a mover? Councillor Holliday, thank you. All those in favor? That carries. Okay, let's run through the agenda. PW 29.1 Metrolinx project. Do we have any speakers on that, by the way? Oh, no speakers on that. So Councillor Mammon Lady would like to hold that. PW 29.2 2, permanent closure of a portion of the north side of Steeles Avenue between Islington Avenue and Humber River.
Order. I understand there's an agreement to defer a part of this. I'd like to move that motion right now. 29.
You want to do that now and then? 29.1? So we'll go back to 29.1. Do you want to move that, Councillor
I
Mamalidi?
want to move that the Finch Avenue particulars on this be deferred to the next meeting. There's no public consultation, and I have some of the largest, the largest industrial pocket in the country there, with the tractor trailers don't know anything about this road closure, and they need to be told with a public hearing of some kind.
So the clerk's saying she needs to write a proper motion on it, so let's continue to run through the agenda and come back to your item, okay? Permanent closure of, oh, I said that already, so what do we do on that? Who wants to move that? No, the 29.2.
I just wanted to better understand, why is, why do they need the closure here?
I'm going to walk out.
Why do we need, sorry? Councillor Mamalidi, where are you going? If you leave, we lose quorum.
All I had was a quick question on it, that's all.
Yeah.
That's all I had.
Okay, well, we've lost quorum if he walks out the door, so.
We're speaking.
Councillor Mamalidi, if you walk out the door, we lose quorum. We already lost quorum this morning.
Yes.
And this is the business of the city. We have 9 important items before us.
Toronto.
Why don't you give him a blank check of what he wants to do, so that way he'll stay in
City Toronto.
he can do everything he wants to do, and then we go.
I'm not sure we like to deal with those types of tactics.
No.
You got it.
Councillor Mamalidi, can you please kindly take your seat so we can resume the business of the city?
Really, really upset. Okay.
I got one on my. I don't like it. What are you laughing for? What are you laughing for?
I'm just being happy.
Hello.
Antonio, you gotta stop.
I have a number. 2, 1, 2, 3. Don't have bird. No, Papa. Stop the music. 1, 2, 3. I broke it. It's. Is it? Is it broken? But it doesn't work it. What?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
you've picked out the highlighted parts of the recommendation. I want them deferred to the next meeting and for a proper public consultation protocol to be established. That's what I want.
Metrolinx does it.
If you do, I'm going to walk out. If you do, I'm walking out. Just ask me. Ask me. Ask me. Ask me and stop ramming it through. Your job's not to ram through the Metrolinx either.
I wouldn't, I agree with you.
Yeah, we're just deleting everything. And everything else stays the same.
Yeah, so that he can move, you know. No, I don't, this is not very comfortable, I think, for anyone being held hostage. Okay, so unfortunately, we've lost quorum. It's now 1:55. So we have till 2:10 to get quorum back. So people can go grab a coffee or something. And if we don't have 4 people in their seats to continue the business of the city at 2:10, then we are recessed. And I'm not sure the implications of that, given some of the important issues on this agenda. No, we're not. We lost quorum, but then you have 15 minutes to regain quorum. So 2:10 is the magic number. Okay. Yeah. Sure. That sounds good.
Chairman? Chairman? Hi, Chairman. How are you?
It's David, Senator.
Hi, Chairman. Counselor. Yes, Chairman, I figured while you have 15 minutes, maybe you could give me a second to speak. I was curious to know.
No, I've just been advised committee's not in.
I understand that. This is just a general, I'm a resident. I don't have any specific alignment with any of the issues.
Good afternoon. Would members of the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee please report to Committee Room 1 for quorum?
Okay, and my understanding is we now have quorum. And there's a motion before committee. Well, I think the mover would have to move it. So, Councillor Mamalady, if you'd officially move that, and then you could ask a question of the mover. Is that what you'd like to do?
Well, I'd like to ask what it first of all means, because that's important for us to do that.
You want to ask staff that question.
And to be just simply sort of sitting under a gun saying, you got to do this or I'm leaving, well, you know, that's not the way we do things around here, not, at least not responsibly anyways. Number one, I want to ask those questions. And then I would like to speak to the issue because it's a very, very important public works project happening in my area, in his, and some others, councillors that are impacted by it as well. And quite frankly, I'm not sure that Giorgio Mamalides' position on this whole project is the sensible one from anybody's perspective other than his own. So I'd like to do those two things on this, which is my right, by the way.
No, I'm not denying you're right. I'm just trying to clarify what you wanted to do.
That's what I want to do.
I haven't even moved it yet.
Pardon?
I haven't even moved it yet.
Yeah, so.
You're letting him go on like.
Well, you did move it. You moved it before you left
I
the
was
last
trying to get
time.
clarification of what he was saying. I think that's fair. Okay, so Councillor Mamalidi, would you like to move your motion, please?
I'll move my motion with the understanding that this thing's going to be dealt with right now. If it's not, then I will leave again. And I will leave because this whole thing has been a disaster in my end of the city from the get-go. There has not been one consultation meeting on the LRT project in York West, not one. Not from Metrolinx, not from the provincial government, not from the MPP, not from anyone except myself. And what we heard from that particular perspective was we don't want the LRT, and we certainly don't want anything closed down without public consultation. So what do we get? We get Metrolinx, and we get the City of Toronto now putting this forward to give staff the ability to close down the roads without public consultation. We have one of the largest, if not the largest, industrial pocket in the country. Logistics means a lot to those companies. You just cannot tell them overnight that the road's going to be closed and for them to figure it out in terms of logistics with their trucking. Finch Avenue is a huge, huge trucking corridor. In the meantime, the city has realized that it's a corridor for trucking because we're about to get into a study that talks about how important Finch Avenue actually is to the industrial area. And we haven't even concluded with that study. We haven't even figured that out, but yet we're prepared to ram through a project and tell the whole end of the north end of the city that we are going to shut down Finch Avenue without public consultation. None. None. And Mr. DiGirolamo, I had Metrolinx and your staff in my office, and I made it clear that public consultation is important. And they left telling me that they're going to wait and have public consultation. And then all of a sudden I get this plopped down at committee. So what's the point of meeting with councillors, the bureaucrats at Metrolinx, the bureaucrats at the City of Toronto, wanting to know my opinion? When I give it to them, this pops up in committee. It's like telling the community, we don't care what you think. We are going to build this thing whether you like it or not. And the last point I want to make is this. I think everybody heard the debate yesterday. I think everybody has heard the debate, and I think that there's movement around stopping some of these projects. And it doesn't make sense for any bureaucrat, whether it's provincial or the city, to do anything until after June the 7th. Because if a new provincial government takes form and wants to do away with some of these projects, why are we spending all this money right now? Why can't we wait till June the 7th until we know firsthand whether or not the new provincial government even wants an LRT along Finch Avenue? It only makes sense. Public consultation is what I'm asking for. In fact, I'm demanding it. Public consultation, I am demanding, because nobody's had public consultation on the LRT on Finch, not the provincial government, not the city, no official meetings, not the MPP, no official meeting, and we are getting something we don't want. So I am doing my job.
Okay, so Councillor Perruzza, you had a question.
What the point is, given that the LRT project on Finch Avenue is basically It's gone through the entire cycle. It started off in 2008. Councillor Mamalidi supported it. It's been through a number of community meetings and consultations. They've held dozens of them in the malls, outside the malls. They've opened an office inside his own ward on Finch Avenue where people can go in and view the project and view all of the works that are being conducted. They've got all that input. And quite frankly, the award, I believe, or the contract, that's basically.
Hasn't been given out yet.
So the proponents, the RFP proponents were picked. Now, I don't know if the contract itself has actually been signed or not, but basically, it's if it hasn't been signed, it's imminent. But all of that stuff has essentially happened. Currently, what's happening on Finch Avenue is the utilities and the are being moved, like the gas companies are moving the gas lines and those kinds of things. What would a public consultation on moving the utilities off of the whatever I guess the new Finch right-of-way for the project, what would that essentially achieve? For anyone who might know the answer to that, what would that do?
No, we've got
Other than giving the local councillors a platform to basically bash the LRT, what could be a conceivable consequence of that kind of public meeting? Other than that,
All of
because I've just been advised by the clerk that you can only ask your question of the mover. We're not in committee because we're going through the rundown of the agenda. We're already straying from procedure a bit, in my opinion, but
so other than giving you a platform to, once again, as you've done through a number of meetings, bash the project in its entirety in front of people in an election year, a couple of months before the election, other than that, what do you see as a possible consequence of the delay and the meeting?
So I believe you came to the public meeting that I did call a couple of years ago along with the mayor and others, and you recognized that over 1,000 people had said that they don't like what they're seeing and they want to be consulted. They hadn't been consulted in any way, and they wanted to be consulted as we went along. That was very clear at that meeting, and the promises made by everybody there that had any influence at all, including Metrolinx, was that they'll do that. Since then, Metrolinx has canceled a number of meetings with myself and others in the community, telling us they don't have time. I can give you the emails as well if you want, telling us they'd get back to us next week, and they never do. And the community's held up with respect to any form of consultation. They're about to expropriate a whole bunch of land on Finch Avenue without really anybody understanding or knowing what's going on in the community. That's chaos. They're creating chaos is what they're doing. And I don't see anything wrong with the local councillors saying, have a consultation meeting on how this road is going to be closed down. And by the way, industry, we'd like to know your opinion in terms of what we should be doing to help you with your tractor trailers along Finch Avenue. And you know what? Even people that come into the city from Vaughan deserve to know that certain streets are going to be shut down, and we should be hearing from not only the constituents in York West, but Torontonians in general, and we should be hearing from anybody that uses Finch Avenue for that matter, going and coming back from any of the industries that are there, and find out what they're thinking about Finch Avenue before we do this. Now lately, you're right, there has been chaos already with the digging that's going on Finch, but it's open right now, and people are going through even the tractor trailers. The other day, Enbridge came to my office with transportation and said they're going to close down Finch Avenue completely without public consultation, without anybody knowing. And last minute doesn't fly with me. So if you're happy, Councillor Perruzza, representing the other end of Finch Avenue without public consultation, go talk to the public about that. I'm not. I think public consultation is important, especially when it comes to closing down roads for a long period of time.
Speakers on this item? Seeing none, I guess we have to move to a vote. We don't have a choice. That's all there is. So the motion is before us on the screens. Hopefully you've had a chance to read it. And so my understanding is this is just deferring one piece of the puzzle for 1 month to accommodate public consultation. The remaining recommendations do move forward to City Council in 2 weeks' time. Correct? Yeah, if we adopt it as amended. So just so everybody's clear. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. The item as amended, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Okay, let's continue on with the agenda rundown. PW 29.2, permanent closure of a portion of the north side of Steeles Avenue West.
Hold, Madam Lady.
So we now have speakers on that item.
Just a quick question if you want.
No, we have speakers now.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, which we didn't before, but I think somebody registered during all the fun we've just had in the last half an hour. PW 29.3, improving accountability in the utility cut process. Move adoption. Was there any staff motions around that? There wasn't anything that you needed? Okay, so Councillor Holiday's moved adoption of that. All those in favor? That carries. I believe that's the same report basically as we had previously. PW 29.4, we have a speaker on that, which is coordinated street furniture program. PW 29.5, StreetARToronto Road Mural Pilot Project. Again, we have a speaker on that item. PW 29.6, next steps on traffic safety measures.
Hold.
Okay, that's being held. And then we've got PW 29.7, clarifying the calculation of landscaping requirements for front yard parking. I believe that's being held by, yeah, that's already being held. No, it's not. It's by Councillor Holiday. He has some concerns with it. PW 29.8, traffic signal operations, Vaughan Road and Moore Avenue intersection. Can we move that, or can that be moved? Okay, I'll move that. And all those in favor, that carries. And then, oh, I thought this one was, I'm confused. Oh, this one's, PW, I'm getting, there's 2 front yard parking pads, but one is not from staff. PW 29.9, front yard parking pad fees and accessible parking, and I think you're going to hold that, or you have questions on that? Okay. All right, so that's being held. And then Councillor Ainsley had an item. It's on a pink piece of paper. I believe he circulated this. It's about local traffic vehicle decals. So I don't know if that we want to have questions on that or refer it to transportation. We don't know. Okay, so first thing we have to do is add it to the agenda. So I'll do that. All those in favor, that carries. Do you want to hold that then for a minute, or? Okay, let people have a chance to read it. It's, like I said, it's on the pink piece of paper. I believe Councillor Ainsley also circulated it to committee members last night by email. Okay, so let's get started. And the first item was held by Councillor Mamalady, 29.2.
You said there's speakers.
Oh, there's speakers on it. David Senator. David, welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Chairman, committee members, thank you for your time this afternoon. I had the opportunity to read the agenda online and would like to comment on some of the production methodologies that the City of Toronto deploys in its temporary road and utility cut construction. I understand that the Director of Transportation is in. Is that correct? Is she in the room? Oh, I see, okay. Well, the point is,
The item we're on is the permanent closures of a portion of the north side of Steeles Avenue West.
correct. My point that I'd like to get to, and I'd like to thank you for your time again, is that there are ways to utilize post-consumer roofing shingles, the old shingles on your roof, that will allow you to make the roads that are good for temporary use for 1/10 the price. And I personally am just a resident of this city, and I don't have any interest in any construction consortium or any type of paving concern. And I just would like to know if you guys could look as a committee to adopt a measure to request that the city look at taking all of this roofing shingle that you guys are paying $7 or $8 million a year and driving it to the dump and use it in the roads and save an additional amount of money. Having spoken to people throughout the City Hall ecosphere, we believe savings on an annualized basis could be upwards of $20 million. And we think it's a smart, progressive, ecological, and financially stable way to utilize a waste stream in new construction. Parking lots can be made out of roofing shingles. Biking paths can be made out of roofing shingles. And other general use of this material can be all found on shinglerecycling.org. So there are mechanisms to save the city upwards of $20 million a year. I took the liberty to potentially do my PhD thesis in shingle recovery, to learn a lot about it just as a pastime, as an environmentalist. And I would like to know if you could go ahead as a committee to consider recommending to your staff that they go ahead and adopt a program to utilize roofing shingles in our roads. Oh, my advocacy had the province of Ontario switch in 2013. The savings are estimated over $213 million a year since 2013, so over $1 billion has been saved in this process. So far, the TTC has included it in its procurement documents. The townships surrounding Toronto have agreed to do it. Everyone is doing it except for the City of Toronto. And I'd like to know on the record and to hold you guys to account to what you intend to do moving forward. Thank you. Thank you. Any questions for the speaker? Okay, I see no questions, so thank you. And we're going to move. Is there a response or a next step? Or, I mean, you're not going to just throw away $20 million a year, are you? I think that this is, you've had your opportunity to speak, and now we're going to move. There was no questions from the committee members. All right, well, I'll hopefully you guys can amend it next month, hopefully, or something. Thanks. Okay, did anybody else have anything they wanted to ask questions to staff on this item? Councillor Mamalady, go ahead.
So I know this parcel of land very well because it's just north of my ward, off of Islington. And we have used it for a bus. The buses were turning there at one time. Are they still turning there?
Through the chair, the portion that's used for the bus turnaround loop, that's being retained, so that's not being disposed of.
So, but we're selling 5 acres to York Region, in and around there? Is it 6 acres?
Yeah, almost 15,000 square meters, yes, that's correct.
And we're selling almost 6 acres of land for $46,000 to York Region?
Yes, that's the value assessment that was provided by Real Estate Services.
So value of land in that area for 6 acres of land is $46,000?
That was the determination by Real Estate Services, yes.
Can I ask questions of real estate, please? That sounds like it's really low. Can I defer this till next month?
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody here from Real Estate Services that I'm aware of.
Can I defer it, Madam Chair, to next month? This is really low, in my opinion. And why would we give away land for this price to York Region?
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't believe this is a time-sensitive issue, so it could be deferred. Correct.
Seems to be a pattern here.
Well,
What about if we forward it to council?
No, can I just add something to that?
Sure.
That if we do defer it back, I understand that York Region needs to expand its pumping station. Could we look at perhaps leasing a portion of those lands to York Region so that they can continue with the expansion of the pumping station, and so that at least that part of it might be able to continue forward? Would it be appropriate to do that or not?
Okay. I think, do you want to move it to council, or do you want to just move it ahead to council, or do you want to come back to?
No, honestly, I think we're losing out on $46,000 for 6 acres of land? No.
Okay. There's nobody from real estate here. There's
I
nobody?
mean, right across the street, Madam Chair, you can,
Okay, let's do that. That's a great idea. Let's stand it down and see if we can get staff from real estate here, and let's move on. So we'll stand down, we're standing down PW 29.2. We've done 29.3 through the agenda rundown. Now we're on PW 29.4, Coordinated Street Furniture Program, Status Update Year 10. We've got a speaker on that, I believe, and that is Dave Meslin. We have only one speaker on that. Welcome, Dave. You're up.
Sorry, I thought there'd be a staff presentation first. Okay, I just have something in the hallway there quickly.
If there's no staff presentation, yeah, if you could just, what's the next item? Maybe we can move on. He's also the speaker on that, though. He's speaking on that as well.
Move to 6, because he's not the speaker. 4 and 5 will hold on. Go to 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is he coming, or should we just move on?
Move on and he'll wait.
Oh, there he is. No, there he is.
do you need some help with that? All right, no problem. Because I'd be happy to help you, Dave. Okay.
Okay, you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair, councilors. So I was here 10 years ago. I guess we're celebrating a 10-year anniversary of the contract. And I came with concerns at the time. We know that street furniture, of course, can be built to high standards or low standards. And our concern at the time, especially after seeing the bins produced by Olafast Marketing Group, you might remember those. OMG, sorry, I'm out of breath. This thing's like 100 pounds. Those came out in 1997, 98, and they were made out of sheet metal, kind of like tin cans. The doors would fall open, they would get dented. And of course, none of us were surprised because they were designed and manufactured and maintained by an advertising company whose primary line of work isn't street furniture. So when the proposal came out for a coordinated street furniture project, we came out here 10 years ago, Toronto Public Space Committee, and we expressed concerns around the economic model. We all know that the golden rule in any financial transaction is you get what you pay for. And the idea was here that we would get magical street furniture for free. And we were concerned that the company, whoever won the bidding process, because they were primarily an advertising company, wouldn't invest the amount of money and effort and attention into the quality of the street furniture objects, that they would prioritize the advertising. So here we are, 10 years later. I don't like being someone to have to say I told you so, but you'll notice a very strong distinction between the Astral shelters and the Astral garbage cans in terms of quality. It's like night and day. Street furniture can be built really sturdy. Mailboxes don't fall apart. The doors don't fall off mailboxes. The stickers don't fall off. They're just built well because Canada Post spent money and time to build, maintain them. The Astral shelters are actually pretty good. They're amazing. They're really strong. The glass is strong. They don't move. They're fantastic because they hold the ads. They have to look good. Their economic model is based on pleasing their customer, which is not you, it's not me, it's the advertiser. And they've shown through their shelters that they know how to do that. I'm kind of guilty of this piece of trash because I was here fighting against having ads on the garbage cans. Maybe if we had ads on the cans, Astro would care about the garbage cans. But I won that campaign, which was when they tried to do the eco-moopies 15 years ago, which were these ridiculous 10 feet high cans. So we fought against advertising on cans, and maybe I made a mistake. Because if you don't put an ad on the furniture, Astro doesn't care. And they've shown that right here. I found this on St. Clair yesterday. This is part of what Astro calls a garbage can. I prefer the word garbage. It's shorter, more concise, more accurate. They've made cost-saving decisions in terms of design, materials, maintenance, and I am now here complaining about this, and this is the 5th manifestation of a poorly designed garbage bin from an advertising company. I hope I don't have to come here for the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, and the 9th, but from the OMG Olafast Marketing Group bins in 97 to the eco-moopies of 2000, 2002, whatever, to the first plastic batch of these ridiculous Fisher-Price toys, to the first edition of the metal ones and the new metal ones. I've been taking pictures throughout the 10 years. I have hundreds and hundreds of pictures of these things breaking. They're dangerous, they're falling apart, they're ugly, they're not being cleaned, the metal breaks. And I can tell you the metal ones are a little better, but they're still falling apart. What I wanted to specifically bring to your attention today, because you're stuck in this contract for another 10 years, we all are, thank you, is that the issues in the staff report that have been raised about the quality of the plastic bins, I don't think they've been addressed well, because they say that they've made this new metal bin, but they're not going to really roll them out. They're just going to try and fix up a bunch of the plastic ones. It talks about screwing shut the back, and it talks about fixing the sides and getting rid of the pedals. This is a front panel. They're falling off. They're leaving sharp pieces of metal sticking out. There's a ashtray hole in it that is supposed to go into a metal box. There's no metal box in here. The plastic has burn marks all around it. It's a fire hazard. You guys got us into this mess, or your predecessors for some of you, but you were here. You were here. Most of you were here.
I was not here.
You weren't here, Stephen. You weren't here. But we're halfway into a contract. The bare minimum you should do is to make sure that Astral is held responsible financially and legally for every piece of street furniture on our streets, in my neighborhood, where my kid walks, being safe and clean. And don't cut corners on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for speaker? No? Okay, no questions. Okay, questions of staff.
So who deals with the garbage that's left in these containers? The city?
Through the chair, yes, it's solid waste who collects the trash from the litter bins.
In last, I think it was last meeting, we learned that anything that is contaminated isn't being recycled. So what measures have we put in place over the next 10 years to establish that their Astro is actually taking care of the educational component to that, and it's not the taxpayer doing it?
In terms of the contamination issue, I would, through the chair, I'd have to refer this to my colleague in solid waste, who's in attendance today.
We have campaigns on the go for contamination in our litter bins and our parks bins. And we are looking at stickering some of the bins that are in our parks just to better educate the public. One of the main issues for us is the coffee cups that are not recyclable.
I'm talking about Astro. I'm talking about what we just heard from the deputy. What's Astro doing to educate the people using their bins in the city? Why does the city have to pay for that part of the education?
Hello?
through you, through the chair, I'll attempt to answer that. Councillor, there's never been a requirement. First of all, we need to differentiate between the bins that are on the streets and the larger bins that are in parks. So Astral is only responsible for the cleaning and maintenance of the bins that are on the streets. There's never been a requirement for them to be involved in any public education campaigns around recycling.
Is there a requirement for them to let us know what garbage is actually been contaminated and isn't going to be able to be recycled from their bins?
Through the chair, Councillor, that matter is entirely handled through solid waste. Astral is not involved at all in the pickup of any of the deposited waste. They're only responsible for the container itself.
We pick up?
Our solid waste staff are responsible for emptying those bins.
So shouldn't we be doing some kind of an analysis of who's more educated around garbage? The pedestrian who seems to be putting it into the bin and the resident who seems to be putting it into their waste collection curbside? Shouldn't we understand before we hand out a contract how much that's actually costing us on that end? Because I would assume that most of the garbage, I'm assuming that if we did that study, most of the garbage that's being collected on the roadside, on the sidewalks, is contaminated and isn't being recycled.
Through the chair, one of the main principles of the Astral bins was to containerize the litter so that we could get away from the wire baskets, which when there was windy days, a lot of litter would blow out of the baskets. We introduced recycling by having dual stream with the Astral bins. Solid waste is responsible to collect the material in the bins, and Astral provides the container through the
I get all that, but we're not doing an analysis of how much garbage is actually not being recycled in these bins. We're just throwing it all in and saying, look, we got to do a better job of educating people because we can't recycle, it's contaminated. But we don't know whether or not all of it or the majority of it's coming from our roads, sidewalks, this system, or whether it's homeowners.
I do have the volumes. I don't have them with me right now as far as the materials collected. I can get that for you. But again, they are dual stream. The idea is to separate the waste from the recycling for pedestrians that are walking the sidewalk, so they're not throwing litter on the ground. And it's a convenience thing, and also to containerize it.
But again, we're handing out these contracts and there's no responsibility to them. Educate.
Through you, Madam Chair, the contract was not about performance on a recycling program. Contract was about providing the furniture, so those types of requirements on performance on separation was not put into the Astral contract. So to answer the question, yes, the contract was specific to the furniture program and not to the recycling programs. The city retained the obligation to do the awareness campaign, the pickup, and encourage the diversion into the right bins.
So in this case,
Last question.
in this case, we're going for another 10 years, and we're going to be with them a while longer. Is there any way that we could look at the next contract, whether or not whoever we provide, whoever is chosen to give us the street furniture, will do it in a way that they actually make sure that the garbage is properly disposed of or recycled so the city doesn't have to do it? Is that something that we could entertain here?
Through you, Madam Chair, in subsequent contracts, you could put in the RFP that they would participate in city initiated programs, and they would contribute towards it. So you can harmonize then the education campaigns. So if you put out a program, say here's the multiple bins, in addition you will provide some communication support. But then you're specifically asking for that they would specifically staff up and bid that way. and you could look at it at that point in time. But at the same time, we would still take the lead on the diversion programs and the objectives.
Through you, Madam Chair, I just wanted to clarify that this is actually a 20-year contract.
Oh, not another 10?
It's not a 10, so we are in this contract for another 10 years. This is just a midpoint check-in, just to clarify where we are.
Okay, seeing no other questions, I'll ask a couple. So Mr. Meslin addressed a few concerns that he has had. I think some residents share his concerns, if not many. So how would you, how can we, given that we're in this, which I don't think if I had been here in this seat years ago, I would have agreed to some of this, but we're here and some of these pieces and parts aren't working effectively. How do we address this?
Certainly, the litter bin has been the unit that's been most problematic for us. And largely the reason it's been most problematic is that it has many moving parts. Unlike all the other pieces that are, for the most part, that are stationary, we have litter pickup every day with our workers opening and shutting the doors. We have people pushing things through the flaps. We have more pedestrian volume than we ever expected. In addition to that, when the contract was let, Astral thought, and it was not a request of the city, but it was a decision of Astral's to put a pedal at the bottom so that people would not have to touch the edges of the openings. That pedal has proven to be, while it was clearly a terrific idea, it's proven to be quite problematic. So there are many moving parts in the particular first generation of litter bin. Astral has made a number of changes to that generation. They're proposing to make a number more, including taking off the pedal, fusing some of the pieces together. We're moving now entirely to a new model of litter bin, which has the metal litter bin, which is a slimmer, has a slimmer profile and has far less problems with it than the old version. So I think over time, we will see that some of the oldest pieces of plastic litter bin will be replaced with the narrower model.
Okay, and the bulletin boards always seem to have an abundance of staples, rusty staples in them, which aesthetically, you know, is not overly pleasing on the street. So I just wondered if there's some way to address that. I know you have people out monitoring them, but is there some way to address that?
Yes, we can, to a certain extent, we rely on the public and we rely on complaints or concerns. Certainly, we're always taking them in. We're happy to take them in. And we can ask Astral to remove the staples at any particular point in time and to do a refresh on those boards.
Okay, thank you. I don't think there's any other questions, so, oh, you have a question? Okay, and then we'll move to speakers. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It'll be really brief. So from this contract, we get a portion of the public service / unsold advertising, and we've been using that fairly well by the looks of it.
That's correct.
I guess we've used the limit. Further to Councillor Mamalides' line of questionings, there seems to be a little bit of deficiency in public's understanding of what to put into these bins, hence creating contamination. Do we know, does solid waste have access to some of the public advertising?
Yes, they do.
Is there any possibility, and I don't think we need a motion or anything, about addressing some of Councillor Mamalides' concerns with that by utilizing the public advertising opportunities to educate people on how to better put garbage into the street bins?
I would be happy to contact our strategic communications group and ask them if they could look at a campaign to use some of that free advertising for that purpose.
Thank you.
Okay, any speakers on this item? Councillor Mamalidi.
Sorry, I just think that you got to take these opportunities as they come along to give your views in terms of even the mistakes we've made in the past. And yeah, I was around, and I recall that much of the decisions that were made around the previous bins versus these ones was because of the amount of advertising and how people didn't want those bins. And they were stainless steel, and in my opinion, probably better to clean than these ones. But we chose these ones for a lot of reasons, and now we're hearing from our public that they don't work as well, perhaps, as we determined. We're in this for another 10 years, and we've got to live with it. But we should start thinking about what the issues are going to be in another 10 years, and start asking even this company to help us get to where we want to go. And one of those issues is contamination. And there's nothing wrong with them being a partner in this and trying to educate people. Why do we have to spend the money as a city when it's their bins and they can educate people? And I'm glad to hear that we'd be asking them to do a little bit of that. The other part to this equation is very controversial, but I think we should have to start thinking about these things. If a company wants to give us bins on the sides of our roads, then they should get rid of the garbage as well that's in it, and the city shouldn't be responsible for that. So maybe we should start thinking about that in the future. And if we did that, they'd be responsible to make sure that it's all separated and taking the responsibility of contamination and all of that, and finding the necessary tools for them to dispose of everything, so it's not the city having to do it. And I think that kind of makes sense, and I think we should start looking at that, so that way we've got a private partner that's helping us with the equation of disposing our garbage and recycling. And it's not just the city doing it. And if we did that, I think we'd have a better achieved goal at even separation. But that's just my views. I'll bring those up another 10 years. I plan on still being here, by the way. I hope so.
Other speakers on this item? Seeing none? Can I have somebody who can move? It's just really for our information, but let's move it. And all those in favor, opposed, that carries. Let's move to our next item. We have another speaker. You'll remember him from the previous item, Dave Meslin. StreetARToronto Road Mural Pilot Program.
Thank you. What a wonderful contrast between item 4 and 5. The first one has been a project that has made our streets incredibly ugly and dangerous to the benefit of one company. And this item number 5, has been such an amazing process of the community and the councillor and staff all working together to create vibrant visual expression created by neighbors for neighbors. And there was a lot of hesitation on the part of staff originally, and I think it's been a really great process for all of us to figure out how to address those hesitations. So we did a 2-year pilot, 4 the first time, and then I think another bunch. And I'm here to speak in support of all the staff recommendations. And I hope you'll vote in favor of the staff report. The only 2 things I'd raise, they're not really that important to me. If I was going to make any suggestions or changes, we're still only looking at mid-block. And I know there were concerns around if you did an intersection, there could be concerns around safety. It seems to be working in other jurisdictions, though, so maybe that's something we could pilot at some point. There's something very visually pleasing of the ones they've done in Ottawa or Seattle or Portland when they're actually painting an intersection. It's just like X marks the spot. The second one is there's a requirement in there that you can only do a street mural if you already have a planned closure. So if you're having a street party, you can paint a mural. But if you just want to paint a mural, you can't. So what we've done the last 2 years is created these fake street parties. So I said to put in a street party permit, and it says, what are you going to do for your street party? And I'm like, we're going to have popcorn. There'll be balloons. It's such a waste of their time and our time. So all it needs to say is you need to have the proper permits to make the street safe. Don't make us play a game with your staff that there is some pre-planned street closure, because there isn't sometimes. Otherwise, it's been a real pleasure to work with your staff. I want to thank my counselor, Cesar Palacio, who is integral to moving this forward. And some of them have already faded away. And I know that was a big concern a year and a half ago, that what's the point of painting a mural on the road if it might just fade away? And I think that's kind of beautiful. Some people do art on the beach just to make a statement about how some things are temporary. And the one in Kensington was gone, I think, in like 3 months. The one in front of my house is still there. I would imagine the one in the Pocket is probably still there. There's very low traffic there. Hiawatha, I don't know, I haven't seen it. But what's beautiful about the temporary nature of it is when you install something that's permanent, a piece of public art, you better get everyone making sure they love it, because you're stuck with this thing for ages. Like Vaughan and Bathurst, they just put this big thing in last week. Some people hate it, some people love it. The good thing about these murals is if you don't totally love it, hey, it's gone in 2 years. So it kind of creates this low-risk opportunity for people of all ages to participate. And I'll just close with that comment. I was going to bring photos and stuff, but I don't want to waste your time. What's really special about road murals is that kids can participate. If you paint sloppily on a wall, not that Antonio would or anyone of his age, it drips down and makes a huge mess. When we do these road murals, we outline the areas for kids, and we're like, put blue there. And if they put too much, it just dries up. And it allows us to work with 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. And if you look at the photos we have up at publicspace.ca, you'll see all these young, diverse people reclaiming and kind of expressing a sense of collective ownership over their neighborhood. And that's such a powerful message that you can make a difference in your neighborhood. So again, thanks to staff, thanks to the committee, thanks to my counselor, and I hope you'll support the staff report. Thank you.
Don't move. I have a quick question for you. So I watched some of these initiatives through the Pan Am Games and felt that, my whole background is arts and culture. Having said that, I'm also like to think of myself as somebody who cares deeply about the environment. Right. And paint going into the systems, whether they're sewage systems or ending up in the lake, is never good. So what I found during the Pan Am Games is the stuff that was done on the bell boxes, we'll call them, the cabinets, stayed. But the stuff that was painted on the sewer covers, is that the proper terminology? Yeah, that would last only a few months, and then it would wear away. Yeah. So my concern is these paint products, are they safe for our city and our water systems?
That's a good question, and thank you for asking it. It's obviously really important. I'm not a scientist, but maybe there's a scientist in the room. My understanding or my guess is that because the paint is dried, when it's fading off, it's breaking off in particles, not something that's dissolving into the rain. And I believe that all of our wastewater systems in place remove that kind of particulate through gravity and filters. I don't think we're talking about chemicals being absorbed into the water, but sorry, do you want to? Sorry, it's not stormwater, it's separate? Sorry, you said something that's not important.
He can't speak right now.
I know, but he was, okay. Yeah.
So sorry.
And I agree with whatever he said, because he probably knows more than I do. And first of all, we are required through the process to, in the first year, we had to submit what are the sheets called? There's a term for the technical specifications of liquid products that describes their chemical elements. At this point, though, starting in the second year, the city actually took it upon themselves to provide the paint through your central warehouse. And I assume they're working with their environment staff to make sure that you're using the best paint possible.
Yeah, so I hope you're right, but it is actually true. If it goes into the storm sewer system, it actually impacts the environment.
I would not be upset or concerned if you were to put forward a motion asking staff to report back to you on whether these pilots may have had a negative impact on the environment. It's a good question to have.
I think I did ask it way back, but
now that we've done it,
I don't think there was kind of a supplementary request to have the environment office look at that, but I'm not sure they ever did.
It's important. I agree with you. I like water.
Okay, I think somebody else. No questions. I think we're done. Thank you very much for your time and for staying throughout the entire morning and into the afternoon to be part of this process. So now we move into committee. Are there any questions of staff?
Environmental issue with with what we've done?
As the chair indicated, before we started the 2-year pilot project, we consulted with the Environment and Energy Office. We provided advice by them. We've already talked to them before this time and agreed that we would consult with them again to see if there were any requirements with respect to the paint. The general advice was that that the paint comes off in such small quantities over such an extended period of time that it was not a significant concern, but we are going to revisit that before we start the next process.
So would it be safe to say that the paint on a fire hydrant would have the same kind of impact to the environment than this might? I'm
not kind of qualified to respond to that, but we could, it doesn't seem like an unreasonable comparison, but we would check with the environmental office and the environmental experts.
Shouldn't we try to make it a little more permanent so that these paintings can actually stay? Maybe our policies would allow for that. I think that's what the deputant was asking. And I think that's what the local councillor would want too.
I think there's a trade-off between the environmental concerns and the paint staying, so that when we paint on a vertical surface, a wall, it stays for up to 5 years or sometimes more. When we paint on the road, it's exposed to the rain, the salt, the snow, the elements, traffic driving over it. It is going to fade away in a much shorter time period.
Those are my questions.
Okay, those are seeing no more questions, we'll move to speakers.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Holiday.
I have a very brief and quick motion, if I can just ask the clerks. Thanks, staff, for the report. The only issue I take exception with is just the provision of money for this. And it's not that I'm trying to skimp on, I think, $5,000. It's just that I'm familiar with the other components of the street art program, and I would much rather see that $5,000 put towards those particular components. Given that the murals only last for a number of months, I think the money is better suited for those more permanent installations. And that's not to say that a group can't come back underneath this program, apply for a permit as being envisioned in the report. The only difference is they'll have to raise the money to do it, and I suspect they probably already do that because I'm not sure that $500 covers all the charges. That's my thoughts on it. Thanks.
So, Councillor, if I can just clarify, what have you altered in the recommendation?
I think I took off the last half of the last sentence. So
Okay.
the recommendation remains, it just, we're not authorizing to put money towards this. I think the groups can go figure that out themselves.
Okay. All right, and I'm going to move a motion, I'll speak next and just say I'm going to move a motion to ensure that if we are engaging in this, that we are using environmentally friendly products so that it doesn't affect our water systems in the city. Just based on some feedback I had from the former general manager of water, now our acting DCM. So she's just typing up my words.
It's a good time. Anthony Prutz is not here. He's having to.
He's here.
No, I know. He's having to deal with his son.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. So if there's no other speakers, we'll move to the motions. So this one's already up there. Oh no, here we go. Okay. All those in favor?
There's no quorum. Sorry, Ann.
All those in favor?
You notice I didn't yell at you like you yelled at me earlier.
All those in favor? Against? That carries. My motion on the environment, all those in favor? Against? That carries. Let's move to our next item, which is item 6. I think there are no speakers on this, but I know Councillor Holiday has a motion.
I have a questions of staff as well.
Okay, let's start with questions of staff. Councillor Mamalady.
So is it accurate that we're looking for staff to have authority to make decisions on much of this?
Through you, Madam Speaker, we are looking at a number of different options, but one of them around school zones in particular, to look at how to streamline the traffic calming process around school zones. That's what we were asked to do via council the last cycle. We were asked to do
You want delegated authority in our wards? around this issue?
We have identified a couple of options for streamlining, one of them being that in school zones in particular, we would have delegated authority on traffic calming. There's a number of issues related to that we've been working through in terms of the ability to do that, and so we brought forward the report as it is right now to table that.
To speak and to move a motion, most likely.
Thank you, Speaker. I apologize. I didn't catch this in time to ask questions, but I do want to highlight a concern. Currently, many of the provisions in this are delegated community council decisions. And I have to say, I'm awfully concerned that the Works Committee would be looking at removing an authority from the Community Council without having brought this to Community Council or had any of those kinds of conversations. So I want to highlight that concern and hope the committee takes it into consideration when they deliberate on this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a motion. There's a couple of components to it. The first half, the component, maybe if I can just ask the clerks to put it on the screen. The first half of the motion are technical amendments to recommendation number 8 and recommendation number 9 with advice from staff. The second part of the motion is that recommendations 7, 8, 9, and 10 be moved as amended. And so those are referring to the work with the Crown, the $100,000 donation to the city, and the activation of the traffic wardens. I also am moving in parts 4 and 5 that recommendations 2, 4, and 6 as a cluster be referred back to the General Manager Transportation Services, and that they come forward in the school speed safety zone report, which is mentioned in this report that is supposed to be upcoming, because I feel that 2, 4, and 6 are integral to that process. And the second referral is 1, 3, and 5 be referred back to the General Manager Transportation Services and come back to us in conjunction with the report on traffic control warrants. And Councillor Davis submitted an administrative inquiry clarifying that that report is coming at some point in the future as well. So that in dealing with the delegation of authority and the warrants, they get dealt with together in that entire package, and that we've got it before us. And simply to me, the principle is I appreciate the urgency on working on traffic safety measures, but I think we need the clarity of those later reports to fully understand what it is that we are delegating. For instance, if we're getting a better picture and understanding of what the school safety zones are in a future report, then we should make an informed decision at that point about any delegations or changes to the rules that we've got, in particular about lowering speed limits. And the same holds true with the traffic control warrants. We want to understand what the rules are around those, the requirements are, so that when we delegate that authority to staff, we have a very clear picture about what it is they potentially would be implementing on our behalf. And we can have a complete debate when it comes to public notification and the processes around that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holliday. Yeah, go ahead.
Apologize, I haven't had a chance to read all of it.
Certainly.
With your motion, we don't have to worry about delegated authority?
Correct. It refers it back, and what we know is that there's a future report coming on traffic control measures and warrants, and the general manager would be able to report on the delegated authority at that time with the warrants.
So why don't we just kill the delegated authority now? Like, this is really dumb.
Yeah, I think that's a great council debate. I suspect you and I would be aligned on that, but I think that having them together all at once is something that is manageable as a policy piece.
So the referral, all the referral does is allows staff to gather up even more argument to take over our jobs at a local level. That's really what it does, the referral, right?
Was that a question?
I don't know. Don't you feel that a
Sounded like a
referral just
comment
gives them
to
an
me.
opportunity to explain why we don't need any politicians in local communities?
Yeah.
And that staff can do it all?
So given that we've had about 4 days to process what all of this is, I'm not comfortable without the full understanding of what we would be delegating, without a clear picture on what the future warrants would be for traffic control measures. So I want to see that before I make a choice on the deferral, or sorry, the delegation of authority.
Do you get where I'm coming from? Like they're just chipping away. They're chipping away at taking away our local democracy. And what we should be doing instead is figuring out how to take a burden off of council and bring it into the community council fold.
So
all of it should be done in a whole, in a one big package of
right.
Right? And
Right.
instead of chipping away at taking our responsibilities away as elected officials.
The reverse argument to that is with respect to speed limits, which is a different discussion, because speed limits don't necessarily involve the public polling component and are far more technical in nature, so there may be some merit in delegating that. But if you don't understand fully what a school safety zone is and what the rules are about creating those, then I personally am not comfortable delegating that authority yet. What happens if some councillor comes along and says, the whole city of Toronto is going to be a community safety zone, and suddenly we have given up all of our authority? But there is some rationale to the argument that if we're going to set up school safety zones, then we don't need to get into the weeds of changing the speed limit, because those should be fairly straightforward and not subjective discussions.
I think you're saying the same thing. I think you're saying the same thing, but we had little time to react, and so the best, our best analysis was to send this back, because I don't think there's a lot of councillors that are comfortable with this. I know I'm certainly not. So Councillor Holiday worked to pull this together very quickly.
I just think that council will kill this as quick as it gets here, so to refer it off. I think you even got Councillor Perks, saying the same thing. I think this thing is just die when it gets to council. Why refer it off? Well, you just don't like agreeing with me, but I get it.
It kills them.
Kills them. Anyway, I'll support the referral to your motion, but you get where I'm coming from. I can't wait for this to come back.
Okay, I think Councillor Pertsa, do you have an environment day today? So do you have to leave, or where are you? How are you? What's your time like?
I do have an environment day that's occurring. I'm happy to stay a little longer and see if we can finish the agenda.
Okay, all right, because this item is very important to address, some of these aspects. Some of it we're sending back, which I think is the right thing to do. Did anybody else want to speak on this? Because I'd like to speak on it. Councillor Mamalady?
Yeah, I want to speak because I want staff to hear what I have to say. This stuff has to stop. This taking over of politicians' responsibilities and turning them into staff responsibilities, it's got to stop. And I see it happening. I've been here a long time, and we're slowly chipping away at the responsibilities that people elect us into office for. If staff want to become politicians, then run for office and deal with them. I don't like these reports when they come up, because indirectly that's exactly what's happening, and I see it, especially around local community issues like school zones. Let my community decide on the recommendations that come forward, whether they want to pull, whether they don't want to pull, whether they want speed humps, whether they don't, whether they want crossing guards, whether they don't. This is not staff's responsibility. These are community issues, and you just can't deal with them with one strict policy. So I'm going to continue to say, leave us elected officials alone and let us do our jobs. And if anything, write these reports that say, let's take a little bit off of council's plate and put them on the community council so we can make some effective decisions at a local level.
You're okay? Okay. I thought you had your hand up to speak, no? Okay, sorry. I wasn't sure. Okay, and so I would just say I fully support Councillor Holiday's motions. I'm also happy to see him moving a lot of this, a big portion of this forward to council, because a lot of these things are very important, particularly, in my opinion, the automated speed enforcement around schools. And this allows us to enter into a legal agreement regarding previously approved policy measures related to the Minister of Transportation and getting this pilot going. It's long awaited, it's long overdue. And I think there's not anybody around the table or across the whole floor of council that would disagree with this being a good measure for Toronto. So it's a very exciting day. This item will move forward to council and be hopefully unanimously supported there. Also, the Vital Strategies $100,000 grant is great news from the Bloomberg Foundation. They've been very supportive of a number of our Vision Zero initiatives here in Toronto, and we thank them for that. So again, great to have that legal agreement addressed today. So that also moves forward. Traffic wardens, in my opinion, the jury's still out. I saw some of them on Bay Street today. Not sure they were fully engaged, so I hope that program evolves. I know it's in a kind of a transitional phase right now, so I'm still trying to assess that program, but we'll see how it unfolds and comes to fruition when we actually have our own wardens in place, which will be at some point. So this is a very important report that we have before us, and we have a few motions to amend the report. If the screen, the clerks could put that up on the screen, we can vote on that and move on. Okay, so all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you, everyone. Let's move to our next item, which is item 7. It's and I believe somebody held this, the clarifying of I think it was Councillor Holiday, the landscaping requirements for front yard parking. I think you had, oh, I'm sorry, you did indicate your interest, yes. Go ahead, I remember that now.
So I appreciate this report was written in a hurry. I found it mind-bending to try to figure out exactly what it said. So I'd like to ask just a couple of questions to see if I've got it right. So currently there's a conflict between the rules for parking pads and our zoning bylaw in terms of the green space requirements both on the private property and on the boulevard, the public property. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay. And what this does is say, let's fix that, and it fixes it in a way that we move back pretty much to the standard that is most protective of green space, both on the public portion and on the private portion. Is that correct?
That's correct, Councillor.
Okay. The one thing that is outstanding for me, and I'm nervous about this one. Previously, if someone came into you and wanted to do a parking pad but didn't meet the requirements, they would appeal to community council. Recently, council made decisions reducing the number of areas where you could appeal to community council, and you can no longer appeal to community council if you don't meet the green space requirement. Is that correct?
That's correct.
However, since it's going to be handled under the zoning bylaw, if you come in for a parking pad and you don't meet the green space requirement and staff tells you no, are you entitled to go to the Committee of Adjustment? This is the one that gives me worry.
I believe there are some wards that are allowed to do that through Committee of Adjustment, but regardless, the applications will come through Transportation, and Transportation controls the approval of the front yard parking pad. So Committee of Adjustment cannot rule over Chapter 918, which
have you any instances of them doing that? Anybody? Bueller?
I can't speak from personal experience.
Maybe someone from legal. Have there been instances of people not meeting the green space requirements for parking pads and going to the Committee of Adjustment and having the Committee of Adjustment approve them?
Maybe I can clarify through the chair.
Sure.
If a portion of the front yard parking pad is on the right-of-way, on the public portion, it would still have to, they would not be allowed to appeal for the landscape requirement.
So if they're okay on the public portion, but they're not okay on the private portion. So I've come into transportation, I've been told the reason you're being rejected has nothing to do with the private portion, you're fine there, but you will not meet the zoning bylaw requirements for the amount of green space on your private property, and we are refusing you on those grounds. Can the applicant then go to the Committee of Adjustment and seek a minor variance to the zoning bylaw for the green space requirements associated with, that result from them putting a parking pad in?
So my understanding is they could probably seek a community adjustment application and try and get approval for the private side, but then they would still need to make an application to transportation for the public side so they could have the whole parking pad, because a portion of it would be on private, a portion on public.
So it's a small problem, but it is nevertheless a problem. Is there any way we could, now I'm not clear about how our authorities work, it's not with the Committee of Adjustment, is there any way we could send them a clarifying memo saying that because once upon a time Mr. DiGeronimo in his role as the water czar said that we have good public policy reasons for not giving up green space having to do with water flow and absorption and all of those things. Is there any way we could inform the Committee of Adjustment that waiving the zoning bylaw here raises more than just minor zoning issues, but it interferes with other areas of public policy?
Through Madam Chair, I think we'd have to look at that in greater depth to see what kind of authorities we have in instructing Committee of Adjustment.
Yeah.
We should take advice from City Legal and planning staff that administer that process. I don't think we are.
Would it be possible to have some clarity on that very, very narrow question in time for council consideration of this item?
We could look at that before council, yes, if committee so wishes. We could follow up by that time, yes.
Thank you. I think that's my time, Madam Chair.
Just Holiday, I think, was next. Do you want to go ahead? Who wants to go?
Yeah, I just want to, I want to ask a question about a process here. Look, I am so upset with this whole policy in general. Does it make sense for me to make a motion, is it in order, for me to make a motion to discontinue all front yard parking all over the city and get rid of even the existing ones, because they are nothing but a bureaucratic nightmare, would that be in order for us to recommend?
I'll vote for that.
Then I'm going to ask the clerk that write up a motion suggesting that all parking, front yard parking be eliminated, future and past, and for a report to come out and let us know how to do that. Would that be a little easier for staff if we didn't have to worry about?
Are you being sarcastic?
No, I'm not.
I think a couple of them
I am not being.
tried out.
I'm not being sarcastic. I'd like to know from staff how to achieve that.
Why? I'm just curious. Why do you want to do that?
Because what we've done in the past is by moving front yard parking, we are increasing the value of some people's houses in the tune of about $30,000 or $40,000, and then maybe more.
Yes, 100,000 in my hood.
And then, depending on whatever community council of the day or any other council of the day can determine that any other neighbor isn't qualified for the increase of value of their house. This has been so unfair.
So you think it's political?
Aren't these kinds of questions for me to be asking, Chair?
Well, the meeting's gone.
The question to staff is, without front yard parking in the city at all, would it make it easier in a bureaucratic sense for you to run your department?
They recommended this in a report.
That's because our policy is to have them.
There was a report on this recently, and they recommended this.
It's because our policy is to have them. If our policy was not to have any and get rid of all of them, would it be easier?
Through you, that's a question of staff, right? Through you, I lost a little bit of track of where we were. Certainly, it is a policy of the city. We do spend a lot of time managing and navigating not only the day-to-day in terms of approval of pads and appeals of pads. I know that they take up a fair amount of time on the Community Council agenda as well. We brought this report forward really to address a technical amendment and a consistency issue between the zoning bylaw and Chapter 918. And we are also going to be coming back likely in the first part of 2019 with a discussion around existing non-compliant parking pads. So we will continue to explore this issue at its, in terms of its implementation. But in direct answer to your question, certainly it takes up a lot of time for our staff, as I know it does for Community Council.
So if I were to ask for a simple report that says, how do we get there? How do we get to a point where we're not going to entertain any of those applications ever again, and we're going to wean out any of the ones that exist? Would that report come soon, or would it take a few months?
But they've already written it. I know I'm not supposed to be speaking, but go ahead.
Madam Chair, we did report in May of 2017. Actually, it was a June 8th, 2017 report to Public Works. And the recommendation in that report was we bring the front yard parking program to a close. And the recommendation from the committee was that we report back to committee on looking at all the unlicensed parking pads and bringing them into compliance, and then also exploring the ability to put the parking pad license fee onto the tax bill. So that report is still outstanding.
And council said no to that, or is it still there?
The direction was to
no,
report back on.
Not me. This one over here.
No, this one over here is right, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, that's you, Stephen.
Anyway, the clerk has told us it's not in order.
Oh, I asked earlier if it was.
Yeah, I was actually trying to be funny. I thought you were being funny.
No,
I'm not being funny either, but it's not in order, so we can't do it. So that fun is over. She said it's not within the scope of the report. Councillor Holliday.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to make sure I understand what I've read, because it is complicated and there's a lot of things happening. So the proposal before us is to leave the zoning bylaw intact as amended, I think, in 2017. And so we're going to amend, is it Chapter 918, to basically remove any green space percentage requirements. So that all drops away. So that's no longer a factor in determining the eligibility of a parking pad on a particular property. Have I got the concept correct?
Sort of. I mean, currently we're using percentage requirements for landscaping.
Right.
But the proposal is to switch to a requirement based on the lot width.
We'll get to that in a sec. But
right.
yeah, but those percentage requirements drop away. And so if I've read the new amendments right, it says if you've got a property that is X width, and if it's below the threshold, you can't have a parking pad at all. It's too narrow. And I think it was 5-point-something meters. Then if your property is 5-something meters to another distance, your parking pad must be 2.2 meters or less. And if you have a wider lot, it must be 2.6 meters or less. And then notwithstanding that, if you have an accessible permit, it's 3.66 meters. Is that right? Like, it's a very simple.
Through you, Madam Chair, maybe I can frame this another way. Really, this report, all it was doing is there's the zoning bylaw, which regulates the private portion, and then there's Chapter 918, which regulates the public portion of the boulevard, we'll call it. And there was a conflict in terms of the percentage, where zoning subscribed a certain percentage, and Chapter 918 subscribed a certain percentage. That was based on previous discussions about environmental sustainability and increasing the landscape open space. There was a discrepancy in terms of how, when transportation went to calculate the overall number, they applied it to the private portion, and they shouldn't have been. So it resulted in a bit more of a restrictive calculation. Zoning has since been amended to take out the portion of the parking pad that's on the private. So that reconciles their part, and now transportation. So it used to be fairly restrictive, the number, and then we toned it back to be in compliance with the zoning bylaw, just as a practice, so which resulted in less percentage landscaping overall. And the proposal now is to basically bring it closer to the intention of 918 in terms of the landscaping. So you're going to be getting close to the original landscaping requirement.
Right.
And we're just, and the proposal is to almost like have a template based on different size lots to make it easier for staff and the public to understand. And this was all related to the
The administration of 918 becomes a little bit more mechanical in that it's very direct. If your lot width is this, then the width of the parking pad is this. So the heavy lifting of the percentage calculation still falls within the bailiwick of zoning, regardless of who administers that. It could be transportation staff or it could be planning staff, but it is now a zoning question. So further to Councillor Perks's concept, the decision point on many parking pads will come down to zoning, if I've got that correct.
I don't believe so. In terms of an order of magnitude, I don't believe that is a frequent occurrence whatsoever.
Because I know that many parking pad appeals that come to at least the Etobicoke York Community Council are under the grounds of percentage of coverage.
But they're appealing the zoning bylaw.
Right.
But that's been changed. So there was, the only reason for an appeal now is if you don't meet the polling, or you don't get a positive poll.
Right.
Or it's related to permit parking, the subscription of permit parking on that street. Okay. Yeah.
So we still have a question about the process for appeal, but we'll get to that. And the last is, how does this work in conjunction with the concept that we're going to have to deal with unlicensed parking pads, and whether or not those parking pads met the percentage of green space requirements? Does this now essentially dump all of the determination of those parking pads onto the zoning examiners with respect to front yard green space?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, it doesn't, because transportation will still be the one window who make the assessment, and we'll be reporting on that under separate cover.
I got that. And so in your estimation, the results of this report are more restrictive than the state that we've got today?
That's correct. And how transportation has adapted in the last few years to be consistent with the zoning bylaw. So it was a change in practice. So it's reverting closer to the intentions of 918 in terms of the landscaping requirements. So we're a lot closer to that.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I just ask a question about, so at North York Community Council, we're very careful about parking pads. We try to be, but it is a bit, as I like to say, willy-nilly. Did you hear that, Gord Perks? Oh, he didn't hear it. Gord Perks? I said willy-nilly. Parking pads in North York are willy-nilly. You laughed last time I said that. Okay, so you have an excuse. Anyway, having said that, I've heard, maybe it's a rumor, but I've heard recently Etobicoke Community Council can often adopt or approve parking pads where there's actually a garage, a driveway and a garage. And I've heard also even where there is a two-car garage. Is that actually happening? Is that true? So on top of a one or two car garage, they're also getting a parking pad.
Through you, Madam Chair, I can see Councillor Holliday nodding, but I don't have firsthand experience with that.
Okay, well, that's just frightening and a worry. But, you know, we should have dealt with this when we had the report before us a year ago, and we didn't, so it's disappointing. I'm not sure, you know, this report came late. I think we just received it last night, but I'm wondering if it would be advisable to defer it. Is there any time sensitivities around this? I'm just curious, it's not been a lot of time for people to absorb it fully. Is there any time sensitivities?
Well, the impetus for the report in the first place was there was a complaint to the Ombudsman's office about the discrepancy between the zoning bylaw and our own bylaw. So that complaint's been dealt with now. So I don't know if they see it as an urgent issue, but it certainly could be deferred from staff's perspective from transportation.
Okay, I was just curious. Councillor Mamalady, have you asked questions?
This is more in terms of a technical, and maybe the clerk needs to hear this. The clerk tells me my motion isn't in order because the last time this was dealt with was July 17th of 2017. So a year has not passed, and that's the reason my motion can't be.
Can you just read your motion just so we're in the loop?
Well, the motion says that Transportation Services report back on the elimination of front yard parking in general, the policy itself. So we won't be able to move, I won't be able to move this until July 17th of this year. So I guess is that accurate, Madam Clerk?
Council adopted item PW 22.5 on July 4th, 5th, and 6th and 7th, so July 8th would be your first opportunity to move.
Of this year. So, Madam Chair, if we are going to defer this, can we defer it to July? So that
Why don't we defer it to the new council in January or February? That's probably more appropriate. What do you want front yard parking?
And I'll speak to why I want to do that. I'd love to speak to it too, but
I would be happy for you to do that. I'm just not sure if we're permitted to do that.
to defer it until July?
Defer
the item?
I don't know.
The item.
The committee can defer the item to whenever it so chooses.
I can refer the item until July, right?
You're just trying to find a gateway. You could also bring a motion, like Councillor Mahavik likes to committee and add it to the agenda.
No, but we're dealing with a report, right, today? Can I refer this report until July? Can I refer it to a date?
Yeah, they said you
in
can
the future
whenever it suits you.
Okay, if I could ask the clerk, my understanding was that this item, so if somebody moved, if Councillor McMahon was here and moved to grandfather all the parking pads that are illegal, that wasn't in order. So is this in order? Because his intention is defer it and bring back this motion that he has before us. I don't want him to be misled and think that he can move that in July.
I understood the councillor's intent.
There is July.
I understood the councillor's intent to be to defer the whole item until July, at which time he would bring forward this particular motion. Although I would still advise that that motion would be out of order because the item itself is narrow in scope and this would be larger than the scope of the item that is before them.
Well, that's my question is, I think Councillor Mamalady's deferring it, thinking he can move that motion, which I would support that motion, but you're saying it wouldn't be in order, even in July.
But with all due respect to the clerk, she came here
That was my advice. But
you told me, Madam Clerk, that this was out of order because a year hasn't passed. So it's out of order for a lot of other reasons, not just because of the year.
yes, and I apologize for that.
All right. So I would have to, in order for me to be able to move this in July, it has to be a little more specific in terms of what we can and should and shouldn't do.
At this committee, you can add items to this agenda. Our next are either our June or July. We have two more PWIC meetings left this term.
Okay, so my intention is to do that. I'm not going to do that today. I'm not going to involve in any motion. I'm going to move this, but my intention is eventually to do that. So can I speak and just at this point or no?
Yeah, Councillor Perks.
I'll do it when I speak.
Visiting councillor, so he speaks first.
I'll do it when I speak.
Oh, Councillor Holiday had one more add-on. So
if it pleases the committee to vary the procedure, I wanted to get clarity from clerks and/or legal, just regards to public notice. I know that the report did come for reasons very late to the agenda, so we didn't really know what the contents were, and neither did the public. But there was some public notice provisions, and I just want to make sure that we've got the best advice, that we've met our duty to make sure that people understand this, because we're changing bylaws here. And when it gets through council, it will have a profound impact, and it may affect the rights of certain property owners. May. I wonder if we could get some comments on that.
That's a question.
So there is a public notice at the back of the report.
The notice actually says, while the staff report sets out proposed changes, the committee and/or city council may make amendments from the recommendations set out in the report. So that phrase covers any amendments that the committee may wish to make.
Okay, and the rationale is if there's a zoning bylaw discussion and this possibly heads off into an adjudicative process, that we've served appropriate notice so that nobody can come back and say that this change was done without all of the, and I don't know all the legal requirements and components, but I just want to make sure that we've got everything.
Chapter 918 does not require the same sort of detailed notice requirements as a zoning bylaw, so this would be sufficient.
Thank you.
Okay, now Councillor Perks.
So thank you very much, Madam Chair and members. I strongly encourage you to, at a minimum, move this report on to council. There are important ecological and urban design reasons for trying to protect that green space. This report resolves a problem, and short of changing our entire citywide zoning bylaw, provides maximal protection for green space, short of banning front yard parking altogether, which, as we've heard from the clerk, isn't an option that's available to you today. There is this outstanding issue of whether, in some instances, the Committee of Adjustment is stepping into this policy area, and I've heard from staff that they can give us better advice on that when we get to council. So please move this along so that we can do something that's maximally protective of important community resource.
Councillor Holliday, did you want to speak? Councillor Mamalidi?
I do. Just before I do that, can I just ask staff if this in any way changes any of the other bylaws in North York or Etobicoke indirectly, this report? In other words, right now, we have a say in Etobicoke with respect to all of this. Does this change all of the North York and Etobicoke bylaws that still govern under these circumstances? Or does this basically say everybody can have a front yard parking now if they have the right green space?
This just deals with the
Just asking before I speak.
Through you, Madam Chair. It doesn't change the bylaws. They'll have bylaws for the entire city, but the changes to the bylaw that we're proposing don't affect whether you can make an application in certain wards or whether you can appeal in certain wards. All those rules still apply.
So the old North York bylaws that say you can't have this still exist? Stop, just stop.
That is correct.
Yes. So this doesn't change that in any way?
Correct.
Okay, I'll speak then.
Okay.
So Madam Speaker, or Madam Chair, I'm going to move referral to July of this item because I think that at the very least there needs to be an attempt to stop front yard parking completely in the city, and I'm going to try to do that in July. I don't know if you'll allow me to move my motion later, but I'll try and work with staff to make sure that that it does comply. So I'm going to move that we just refer this off for 2 more months, so that some of us can actually try to bring forward an argument that says it doesn't make any sense, and that any bylaws are not fair. Any bylaws that pertain to this, like we're going to go to council with if it does go, is unfair to the resident on any street that is disliked by any councillor or neighbors, and will refuse them with an application when their next door neighbor perhaps was approved the year before or 10 years before to have one. The whole front yard parking thing doesn't make any sense to me. Council, it depends on the applications, obviously, in the past and the future, but overnight, we can make somebody's value of a house go up to the tune of $40,000 to $50,000, $60,000 with these kinds of decisions, and the next door neighbor comes in with an application the next week and is rejected. That, to me, is a policy that doesn't work. That for the average homeowner and the average person that wants to do this. So we either accept these applications for everybody, or nobody gets front yard parking, and that's where this city should go, and no in-betweens. It's either yes or no, and that's where I come from, and I'm hoping to keep trying to do that. In Etobicoke, it's a nightmare. It takes up most of our time at Etobicoke Community Council, and some are approved and some are rejected. And I see these poor constituents who look at their neighbor in I can remember one instance where their neighbor was approved for a front yard parking, and they were rejected. And they were just shaking their head, not understanding our policies. Their neighbors' increase of the value of their property went up with that vote, and they shook their heads saying, how unfair is this? So that's where I come from this. It's unfair policy. And let's deal with it before the election so that the councillors can actually go out and say, do you want these things or don't you? Should I get rid of them or shouldn't I? And use it as a platform, perhaps, in terms of next municipal government. And also, I just think that the same people that created this nightmare, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, it started at the bottom end of the city to allow these things to happen. The same people that voted in favor and create front yard parking are now trying to get rid of cars in the City of Toronto. So the same councillors that represent all these jurisdictions that have front yard parking are now saying we don't need any more cars in the City of Toronto. Let's get rid of them and let's find ways of doing that. So I don't understand. On one hand, you approve front yard parking with a car, and then the next debate on council, you're trying to get rid of the car in the City of Toronto. So if these councillors really had enough courage, they'd go to their electorate and say, we got to get rid of all of them. But you know what will happen? If they do that, they'll lose the election, right? So I'd like to try to force it as even an election issue.
Okay, I have a question for you.
There's the real reason.
Yeah. You want to defer this item so you can move a motion that you've been advised by the clerk that's out of...
No, I'm not moving this motion yet. I'm just giving you my intent for July.
And you're...
I'm going to work with language to make it in order.
What is your objective in the motion that you want to move in July? What is your end objective?
Well, maybe I'll reserve that opinion for July.
Well, no, because I have to decide if I'm deferring it or not. So I have to understand what your objective is, if I'm going to support you or not.
Well, I think we're going to be spending unnecessary money between now and July. In July, we have an opportunity to reopen this thing and debate whether or not we want these things in the city at all.
So you don't, are you saying
right
to
now,
me you don't want parking pads? You don't support parking pads? You don't support parking pads?
No.
You don't think we should be putting cement on
Point of order.
lawns?
What I support is a...
Can I get a point of order in, please?
What I support...
No, because we're talking.
What I support is a policy that says homeowners are either allowed to have them or not allowed to have them, right?
Well, that's a policy now.
No, right now, even now, with what's going to council, it will determine what level of support they get from the local council.
The point of order is this, Madam Chair. We have a report in front of us that deals with landscaping.
And that's
landscaping, essentially how you landscape around a potential parking pad.
He's yelling again.
That's what we have. And now we're in a conversation about whether or
yelling.
not we should have parking pads. The two, like,
He's yelling.
while it might be a related conversation, it has nothing to do with each other. We should just move on to a vote.
No, but the point is, he thinks he's going to move that motion in July, and at the July meeting...
He may not be here in July.
Can I get a seat?
He might not show up.
Out of order. He's going to be ruled out of order.
Can I move my seat for next meeting? because he yells in my ear.
With the clerks. I don't have any.
Is there any way to get
jurisdiction over
earplugs or anything on my right ear?
arrangements.
Anything?
But I just wanted to be crystal clear that you've been advised that you can't move that motion, even if you do defer this for 2 months.
I can with the right language in July.
No, she's saying it's out of the scope of the report. But anyway, that's what she told me. Okay, any other
No,
comments
that's not what
on
she,
this?
no, Madam Chair, let's be clear. That's not what she said.
Yeah, I'm trying to be clear.
Okay, let her
Trying to be
describe it.
clear and to tell you exactly what
Let her describe
cases.
it. Let her describe it then.
Okay.
The motion as it now stands from Councillor Mamalidi would be out of order today if it was moved because it is out of scope of the report that is before them. If the matter is deferred and the same motion is moved, it would again, I would advise, of course, subject to the committee's final ruling on it, I would advise that such a report request would be out of order because the same circumstances apply.
So what you said earlier was that it needs to be a little more specific. I think that's what you said. And that's why it would be out of order. So if it were a little more specific in July, it would be in order or it wouldn't?
I can't comment on hypothetical at the moment.
Okay, anyway, my plan is, look, my motion's my motion. You support it, you support it. I want to refer this to July's meeting.
Okay, Councillor Holliday, did you want to speak on this or no? Okay, he's giving up. Put your hand up, put your hands up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm clear on everything.
Okay, thank you. So all those I guess we'll just put the motion on the screen. All those in favor of Councillor Mamalidi's motion to defer this item to July 10th?
Recorded vote.
What are you voting with them for?
Recorded
You
vote.
just made a big point of order
I need
speech.
to go. I need to move this along. Come on, let's
Recorded
go.
vote. Recorded
Otherwise,
vote.
you just get bogged down all over again.
Recorded vote, please.
All those in favor of adopting the deferral motion before you? Councillor Mamalidi. All those opposed?
No, Councillor Perruzza too.
All those in favor of adopting the deferral motion before you? Councillor Mamalidi, Councillor Perruzza. All those opposed? Councillor Holliday, Councillor Robinson. That motion fails. The item moves to council without recommendation.
Okay, I'll move to adopt it.
You're moving adoption?
I'll move to adopt it.
Okay.
Thank the Ombudsman's office for this. No, I don't.
Recorded vote, please. Recorded vote.
All those in favor of the adoption that Councillor Robinson moved, Councillor Holliday, Councillor Robinson, Councillor Perruzza. All those opposed, Councillor Mamalidi. That motion carries.
Okay, so let's move to PW 29.9, which is the front yard parking pads and front yard parking pads again, yay, and accessible parking permits. I think, Councillor Holliday, you had a motion on this? Okay, questions of staff?
We're at 29.9, Madam Chair, correct?
Yes, 29.9, front yard parking pads, fees, and accessible. It's an add-on. It's not a staff report.
Yeah, Madam Chair,
It's an add-on.
I regret that now. I tried to stay, but
That's what I was worried about.
In 10 minutes, I got to go.
Okay, so
I'll
that's
be
why I was
quick.
hoping, yeah, we
Very
can be quick
quick.
and just move.
I just wondered if staff could describe how we handle accessible requests in front of properties. My understanding is that there's a process for a person with an accessible permit to get a space immediately in front of their property designated with accessible signs.
That is correct. We would institute a bylaw on the street to provide for an accessible loading zone.
And we do this all the time? There's no cost to them for that?
That's correct.
And does staff have any concerns about a process around managing parking pad fees in conjunction with the status of someone's accessible permit? Is that something simple to deliver, or are we looking at a fairly arduous administrative process to try to make that work fairly?
Well, it would certainly add to the amount of work the staff has to do because they would have to be monitoring when people move from a property or whether they didn't need the accessible spot anymore.
And I mean, this is the waiving of fees on the parking pads, and what about the status of someone's accessible permit? Because those can come and go over time and change.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
To defer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to move to defer this indefinitely. My understanding on this is that it would be extremely difficult to make happen for the administrative reasons discussed, and that there are already a process to accommodate those with accessible permits so that they can have parking close to their home. We see this all the time at Community Council and vote on it almost every month to install and move and remove those particular spaces. And because of that, I'm satisfied to defer this item indefinitely.
Thank you, Councillor Holyday. And I'll just say I'll support Councillor Holyday's motion because there is clearly, as just been indicated, a process in place. Okay, so we'll go to a vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? That carries. Our last item is PW 29.10, local traffic decals. It was added to the agenda, introduced to the agenda this morning. I believe, again, Councillor Holyday has a motion on this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to refer this to staff for their consideration.
Is everybody comfortable with that? Because my understanding is from our legal team that this is not enforceable, but we can ask staff to comment on it. So we'll motion to refer to staff by Councillor Holyday. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. And I believe our agenda, oh, no, there's one item that Councillor Councillor Mammoliti had held, PW 29.2, the north side of Steeles Avenue West, the permanent closure. Is there somebody from real estate here?
So I'll try to.
Real estate staff are here?
Yeah.
I understand.
Councillor Mammoliti, you had a question.
So just before I ask questions, I'm putting the committee on notice. I just heard from the clerk that I could in fact move a motion in July, a separate item on the parking pads. And you know I hate things coming up at the last time, last minute.
I know that.
That's why I'm telling you now that in July you're going to get a motion from me, trying to
surprise us. Let's deal with this one.
So I just thought I'd say that on the record that I'm going to do that. Okay, so
Thank
it's
you.
no surprise to you in July.
Thank you for no surprises.
Yeah. Is there a hurry to sell this land to Vaughan?
Well, they have thank you, Councillor. They have intention of doing some infrastructure work up there. They have to expand their current water facility, and that's why they approached the city.
If I were to defer this for a month, would that make or break the deal?
Well, they're quite anxious to start the process. You know, it's the summer coming up, the spring, so they are anxious to start.
Through you, Madam Chair, just
wasn't my question.
Clarity
Sorry, I
with
would say
respect
yes.
to timing on the infrastructure. Yes, so York Region does need to expand the Humber pumping station.
So 1 month would affect the sale
We'd
of
have
land?
to check. I don't know whether they're issuing their tender or not. It could potentially delay their construction. If there are other concerns, I did look into the issue of, you were asking questions earlier about the valuation and the price per acre. I checked on the TRCA floodplain map. The lands in question are within the Humber River floodplain, so that would make it undevelopable, and therefore probably why the cost is low.
So let me just say this to you, another question. If it's $46,000 for 6 acres of land there, I don't understand where across the street, which is also floodplain, there's residential homes that are caught in that floodplain, and each of those homes are worth about, not even, it's a very small lots. 25 by, I think they're 25 by 75, and they're worth like $800,000. I don't understand
Madam
that.
Chair, the issue is whether you would allow development to occur at this point in time, and no, you would not be able to get a permit from the Toronto Region Conservation Authority on the lands in question. With respect to permissions that were granted previously in floodplains, they're already there, and so the valuation is in place.
I'm talking right now about the value of the land, $46,000.
And then that's exactly what I was addressing. The value of the lands in question were appraised on the basis of being floodplain and not developable and not being able to get permits at all. The zoning today, as well as the TRCA's jurisdiction, you would not be able to put the houses, if you use that as an example, on that, and therefore makes the value negligible.
So then why are we giving the land to Vaughan? Why are we not giving it to the Conservation Authority?
Through you, Madam Chair, the way I'd answer it is because we've already given them some lands in the past. There's a Humber sewage pumping station there. They need to expand it. They need more lands. We've done arrangements with them.
Lou, part of it, I don't understand this. We're saying to Vaughan, we know that you have to build a pumping station, and we're going to sell you the land for $46,000. And we can, in fact, lease that land to them if we wanted to instead of selling it to them. And that's an option that I hope we could look at, and I'm going to try and move that if I can. But I'd also like to say to you, why is it that the rest of the land, that you're not going to get a permit for, and you're not going to, why is it we're not giving it to the Conservation Authority? Why are we giving it to Vaughan?
Or selling it to the Conservation Authority.
Or even selling it to the Conservation Authority.
Those are the recommendations we put forward to staff for them. There was a request made by York Region. We've made requests of them in the past. And in fact, this committee accepted ownership of a sewer that was owned by York Region, and we took possession of it last week. So we do these reciprocal deals with York Region. We requested that, and they accommodated that request at free of charge on that sewer. So this is just our recommendation. The committee can direct us otherwise.
So I sit on the Conservation Authority, and it would be irresponsible of me to not try to get the Conservation Authority to take ownership of the land that's unusable. And for us to give it away to a municipality if they can't use it doesn't make any sense to me. So I'd like, I don't know how you feel, committee members, but I'd like to defer this off for a month so that staff can look at the options of leasing that site to the, no, Councillor Holyday doesn't want to do that. You want to give it away for $46,000.
Through the chair, if I can just, I have to leave, but I wanted to contribute very briefly to this. I too sit on the Conservation Authority, and the Conservation Authority looks for these opportunities. If you wanted to, if the lands are not developable, and you, because selling them to York Region will use a small sliver of that land for their pumping station. The rest of it is going to become a driving range or some kind of an amusement park for some private entity, and they should be naturalized lands if they're in the floodplain. And the Conservation Authority is the best institution to be able to do that.
I'd like to refer this off.
Allow York. We need an option that allows York Region to do what York Region needs to do.
I was still speaking.
But we need to do it quicker, Judge.
Okay. Well, I'm going to defer this for an opinion of the Conservation Authority. I'd like to defer this to the Conservation Authority for their opinion on this matter. I think the Conservation Authority should weigh into this, given the fact that they are a partner next door. And I hope you can support this, at least.
Favor. You should be in favor. That's one vote. All those.
The deferral?
Yeah, what's before us on the screen.
No, I said to the Conservation Authority, a deferral for an opinion of the Conservation Authority, so that they know about this and have any comments to make about it. Why wouldn't we want them to know? I would like, yes, I'd like them to discuss it and give us their opinion. I don't know why my committee members wouldn't want to support this.
Madam Chair, may I speak to the...
Go ahead, yeah.
So I would just make the comment that I appreciate the intent of Councillor Mammoliti, but if it's delivered to the Conservation Authority, and assuming they actually want it and they haven't already said no, then the City of Toronto continues to pay for the land in an indirect way because we pay to help support the the TRCA. So in my calculus, selling the land to York Region makes it their responsibility to look after ongoing. And so far before me, I have staff's advice on the value, and that's the value. If the value is determined to be something different, maybe that will come out between now and council, and we'll deal with it there.
Okay, we have a motion before us on the screen. Councillor Mamalady deferring the item until there's discussions with the TRCA. All those in favor? Opposed? That does not carry. It loses on a tie. And on the item, I guess we move the recs then? Yeah, so move the recs. I'm just trying to see what they are here. I'm back up to 2. Oh, adopt the recommendations from staff. All those in favor? Opposed? So it goes to council without recommendation. Okay, and we are now adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Starving.